Hello, Willignan kids. Today is Palm Sunday, and if you remember last week's lesson, you'll know that today is the day we remember how people waved palm branches as Jesus came into the city of Jerusalem as the Christ, the Messiah, the special anointed one sent by God. Now, you'll remember how the people saw Jesus riding on a donkey and how they celebrated him as a king. Well, Jesus would be a king, but you'll remember how he would not be the kind of king the way that they would have expected. In fact, Jesus said that his kingdom would not be of this world. In fact, today we're looking at Jesus as servant. He actually showed us that he was a servant, that he served us. And in our story today, he served the disciples. See, it was the night of the Passover feast, and Jesus was getting ready to have this important meal with his disciples. You might know this as the Last Supper, when Jesus took the bread and the cup and how we remember that he would die for our sins. The book of John talks about that night and how Jesus knew what was going to happen. He took off his outer robes, Jesus wrapped a towel around his waist, and he took the position of a servant, washing his disciples' feet. Now, you can imagine a culture where people walk around in sandals all the time with dust and sand and dirt and mud, as well as animals just wandering around the streets and yards, camels and donkeys and horses and sheep and all the gross stuff that they would leave behind. So you could imagine that washing people's feet would be very low on the list of jobs that people would want to do. So when the disciples saw Jesus doing this, they were confused. Surely Jesus was too important to do such a gross job. Peter even told Jesus, "You will never wash my feet. Surely you will not." You see, the disciples, they didn't understand. But what Jesus was doing, washing the dirt and grime from their feet, all that, it was nothing compared to the dirt and grime of sin in their hearts. They needed to be clean on the inside, to be forgiven of the grossness of sin. And Jesus, he would die on the cross to do exactly that. Every time I think of it, I realize just how much love Jesus had, how much love he had for us, how much this perfect love he had for God to obey him and follow this painful plan. Jesus knew that one of his disciples was going to betray him and have him captured. Jesus knew that the disciples would fall asleep when he asked them to keep watch and to pray. Jesus knew that all of them would run away afraid, that they would abandon him when the guards came. And Jesus knew that Peter would even deny him, that he would lie and tell people that he doesn't even know Jesus. Even after knowing all that, Jesus still took that humble, lowly job to serve them and to love them. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to do anything nice for someone who was mean to me, especially not a gross or embarrassing job like washing their feet. But Jesus showed us what perfect love and what perfect obedience looks like. He even gave the disciples and us instructions to follow his example. Later on in the Bible, we are given these instructions again in the book of Philippians. As you deal with one another, you should think and act as Jesus did. In his very nature, he was God. Jesus was equal with God, but he didn't take advantage of that fact. Instead, he made himself nothing. He did this by taking on the nature of a servant. He was made just like human beings. He appeared as a man. He was humble and obeyed God completely. He did this even though it led to his death. And even worse, he died on a cross, even death on a cross. After that meal with the disciples, Jesus went to a garden to pray. When we read what Jesus prayed to God that night, we see how Jesus would obey God the Father and put aside his own plans or ideas. He says, "My Father, if it is possible, take this cup of suffering away from me. But let what you want to be done, not what I want." That's from Matthew 26, verse 39. Jesus loved God so much that he would obey him even unto death. As he served all of humankind with a way out of sin, It wasn't a mistake that Jesus would be in Jerusalem and doing all this during Passover. Well, you might remember that many, many years before Jesus, the people of Israel were slaves far away from home in Egypt. And as part of God's rescue plan, Egypt had horrible disasters come upon them. God sent plagues, which included the death of the firstborn of each family. The Israelites, however, they were given the instructions to sacrifice a lamb without any sickness, without any imperfections, and as people obeyed, they were to put its blood on the doorway. Upon seeing the blood, the plague would pass over the house. It was after this plague on that night that Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, he let the Israelites leave and go free. Now, God was giving us a preview of Jesus. Jesus would be that perfect, spotless lamb who would be killed. His blood would be a sign showing what perfect obedience and what sacrifice looks like and how it would save any who believed. Just like the Israelites were freed from being slaves in Egypt, Jesus' death would free us from slavery to sin. We aren't trapped in it anymore. Ephesians 1 verse 7 says, "We have been set free because of what Christ has done. Through his blood, our sins have been forgiven. We have been set free because God's grace is so rich." What a thing to celebrate and remember. By the end of the week, Jesus, he would be betrayed, arrested, abandoned by his friends and disciples, beat up, mocked and made fun of, tortured with a whip and a crown of thorns. He would be put on a cross to die and be taken down and put in a tomb. All those horrible and sad and awful, terrible things, that was the wrath or punishment of sin that was supposed to be ours. All of that was being put onto Jesus. From that time that Adam and Eve disobeyed God, when sin entered the world, everything was pointing to this moment when sin would be dealt with once and for all. It would be the saddest, worst moment to ever happen, but it would also, in a way, be the best, most amazing, wonderful thing ever to happen. That is, until something even more wonderful and amazing would happen 3 days later.